Welcome back to Literature Guide. Today's video is about Pylon Poets and Martian Poets. The term Pylon Poets has been applied to a group of poets of the 1930s. It has been taken from the poem composed by Stephen Spender called The Pylons. Pylon Poets are also known as Auden Group. The Pylon Poets were hailed as Pylon Boys by Cyril Connolly. This group comprised members such as W.H. Auden, Louis MacNeice, Stephen Spender, John Betjeman, and Cecil Day-Lewis. These Pylon poets were highly inspired by the metaphysical poets, and they employed images from industry and technology. They used these images in a very novel fashion into their poems. The readers can find many images of aerodromes, railway platforms, and pylons in their poems. The Martian poets were a group of poets in the 1980s. The term Martian has been coined by John Fenton. This group comprised some writers such as Craig Raine, Christopher Reid, David Sweetman, and Oliver Reynolds. The Martian poets changed the reader's ways of seeing and experiencing everyday things by defamiliarizing the everyday things in their poetry. Like the metaphysical poets, these Martian poets yoked the most heterogeneous ideas together and present them in their poetry. I have recently produced two videos on modern poetry. For example, Georgian poetry and Imagist poetry, pattern poetry and concrete poetry. You can watch these videos by visiting this channel Literature Guide. If you really like the videos produced by this channel, do like and subscribe Literature Guide so that you can get many videos like this one for you in future also. I don't want to waste your time. Let's dive into the video and enjoy the video.
Pylon Poets and Martian Poets. The term Pylon Poets has been applied to a group of the poets of 1930s. It has been taken from Stephen Spender's poem The Pylons, published in 1933. The Pylon poets were influenced by Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud. They tried to mingle Marx's philosophy of revolution with Sigmund Freud's psychology of the unconscious in their poetry. The Pylon school of poets is actually a nickname of the MacSpaunday group of writers. The term MacSpaunday refers to a group of Louis MacNeice, Stephen Spender, Wystan Hugh Auden, and Cecil Day-Lewis. These poets are also known as Auden Group. The term MacSpaunday comprises the names of these poets. Cyril Connolly hailed them as Pylon Boys. The term MacSpaunday was coined by Roy Campbell in his work Talking Bronco. The group of Pylon poets comprised famous poets such as Wystan Hugh Auden, Louis MacNeice, Cecil Day-Lewis, and Stephen Spender. The Pylon poets were influenced by the metaphysical poets, and they made use of modern and scientific images borrowed from technology and industry in their works. Wystan Hugh Auden emphasized the significance of objective attitude, and he had great faith in social upheavals as a means of bringing reform in the diseased social order. The images of pylons and skyscrapers appeared in Cecil Day-Lewis's poem, Look West, Wystan, lone flyer in his famous volume The Magnetic Mountain. Similarly, W. H. Auden's poetry abounds with images of power stations, crowded roads, landscapes of arterial roads, and the frequent image of a lone wanderer in an empty landscape. Stephen Spender showed awareness of the modern technological age and its machinery in his early poetry. Stephen Spender excelled in his short lyrics. His poems The Express and The Landscape Near an Aerodrome clearly indicate his interest in terms borrowed from science, machinery and industry. He has artistically made use of these terms in his poetry. Stephen Spender's poems vividly imply intrusion of technology and industry into the serene and tranquil territory of nature. The two mighty forces, nature and technology, go hand in his poetry. Some of Stephen Spender's poems reflect the poet's inclination to left-wing politics. His famous poem An Elementary School Classroom in a Slum is concerned with cultural disintegration and class conflict in interwar Britain. Another renowned poet of Pylon Group of poetry was Louis MacNeice, who was a much finer artist of this group. He dexterously handled words and language with great control and balance. He produced collections of poetry like The Earth Compels in 1938, Autumn Journal in 1939, Plant and Phantom in 1941, Springboard in 1944, Holes in the Sky in 1948, Autumn Sequel in 1954, and The Burning Perch in 1963. Louis MacNeice has adroitly employed internal rhymes, assonance, half-rhymes and repetitions in his poetry. In the poem Birmingham, Louis MacNeice featured trains and trams. He has given a detailed record of his environment in great detail in the forms of a diary, letter or journal. It clearly implies that poetry itself is not special but is open to all readers. Louis MacNeice has expressed his concern about the modern world, which is equipped with machines and over-dependent on material values. W. H. Auden and Christopher Isherwood made use of images of power stations and filling stations in The Dog Beneath the Skin. John Betjeman was associated with the group of Pylon Poets. His poetry was written in satiric and ironic vein. John Betjeman had great fascination for Victorian architecture and churches. His poems deal with the themes of childhood and nostalgia for England before the First World War. His poetry presents harsh realities of his time, and it imparts happiness of the past to the old generation. John Betjeman produced collections of poems such as Old Lights for New Chancels, A Few Late Chrysanthemums, and collected poems, High and Low and A Nip in the Air. His volume of poems Old Lights for New Chancels contains 18 topographical poems. John Betjeman's poetry dealt with everyday affairs in which the poet has depicted modern urban life in realistic manner. Though Cecil Day-Lewis was greatly inspired by Wystan Hugh Auden, he has demonstrated his originality and freedom of manner in his poetry. He had great fondness for imagery drawn from machinery and some aspects of modern life. His collection of poems Magnetic Mountain appeared in 1933. Like other poets of his group, he found solace in left-wing ideals as a remedy to social problems. The term Martian poets has been employed for a group of poets in the 1980s in Britain. The term was coined by a poet, essayist and journalist, James Fenton. The term Martian poets has been derived from Craig Raine's collection of poems A Martian Sends, a Postcard Home, published in 1979. Craig Raine's first book of verses, The Onion, Memory, was composed in 1978. The Martian poets were not an organized group of poets. The Martian poets expressed their thoughts in a novel fashion by using figurative language and employing similes, metaphors, and conceits, bringing unexpected perspectives to everyday things. Craig Raine has been deemed as leader of the Martian group of poetry. The Martian poets presented the familiar and everyday things in an unfamiliar ways by tearing away veil of familiarity. Craig Raine has artistically employed metaphors and similes in his poems for making the everyday things and objects unfamiliar, and changing readers' habitual ways of seeing the world. For example, books are Caxtons, that oilet is a punishment room where everyone's pain has a different smell, the moon fading in the morning like fat in a frying pan, and a pug like a car crash. Craig Raine's A Martian Sends a Postcard Home transformed everyday objects in a playful style of defamiliarization. In A Martian Sends a Postcard Home, Raine has shown familiar earthly scenes through the immature eyes of a visiting Martian. For example, Raine is when the Earth is television. Craig Raine has also produced two collections of free translation in 1981 and Rich in 1984 with the same tendency to defamiliarize everyday experiences in new light. Like Craig Raine, Christopher Reid has also shown his individuality and originality in his collection of poems, Arcadia, which was published in 1979, and Pea Soup in 1982. Christopher Reid has also produced collections of poetry in the Echoey Tunnel in 1991, Expanded Universes in 1996, and Mr. Mouth, which deals with a story from life to death. Christopher Reid's poetry contains humor, wit, melancholy, and grief. The other members of this school of the Martian poets were David Sweetman and Oliver Reynolds. David Sweetman produced Looking into the Deep End in 1981. Oliver Reynolds' Skevington's Daughter displays playful kind of defamiliarization.
How's the video? I hope you liked the video. As I have already told you, I have already produced many videos for you on this channel. If you visit my channel, you will find many useful videos for the competitive exams such as the NET and SET exams conducted by UGC India. You will definitely get some help from the videos uploaded on this channel. If you really find the videos useful for you, do like and subscribe Literature Guide so that I can produce more content for you in future also. And if you subscribe the channel, you will definitely get notifications of my videos on time. I will meet you soon with a new video on different topic of English literature. Meet you.
Please subscribe Literature Guide.